thank you, everybody. My name is David Caravella. I am the VP of Marketing at Sprout Social, a social media software company based in Chicago. I've got a great panel here, and I'll introduce them and let them give a little bit of their backgrounds. One of the things we're going to talk today about is just sort of analytics and using analytics and data to inform not only decisions, but just sort of success.
I'm Theo Sky, Executive Creative Director at a small firm called MediaLens, now an ad-serving platform for the past 6 years, specifically for mobile. So I didn't hear anything that our moderator just started with, but I don't know what I'm supposed to say right now besides that. That's good, that worked. Thanks.
I'm Elian Ramos, and I've done so many things over the years. I started in advertising, but now I dedicate all my time to do advocacy campaigns for the Latino community, and that's what I'm going to say about that.
Hey, I'm Mike Graham, and actually, excuse me for a second, I was so taken by that example from Interflora before. I just need to finish this tweet at Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. I am really bummed out today. Here is my address. As you can tell by my native Brooklyn accent, I'm from Queens. So I came online back in 1995. I've been around for a very long time. For the past 5 years, I was group publishing director with a company called Incisive Media, and the brands that I was running were ClickZ.com. How many people read ClickZ? Put your hands up. Thank you, guys. Those of you who didn't put your hands up, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Go and sign up right now. I was also publisher of Search Engine Watch for those 5 years, and producer of the SES Conference and Expo. But recently I went back to my roots in search and rejoined my old agency, Acronym, so I'm perched on the 65th floor of the Empire State Building.
Fantastic. So the first question I've got, and certainly if anybody has questions, feel free to raise their hands throughout the session. Is this okay for everyone else? Just please feedback. The first question is, I guess, when it comes to data, and certainly around social media, but data in general, where do you begin? What's your sort of grand macro level thought around using data to for each of your companies and each of your perspectives? Where do you start?
Fundamentally, I think we should start with Theo.
On the spot. Well, as an ad-serving platform, MediaLens is a data company. I mean, advertising, digital advertising especially, is all about data. Data is the actual product. I'm on the creative side, and I work with the agencies and help them get their campaigns to market on mobile, but fundamentally the real product is what happened when that ad was served. In terms of the clients that we work with, all the publishers and all the advertisers, data is key. Data is the actual thing that's being sold.
Well, in terms of data, I work with government agencies and also with some of the Congress, the different departments within the Congress and the Senate. And so it's essential to kind of get a general idea of where not the consumers, but the general audience is in certain issues before you even start doing an outreach campaign. So we certainly look at, there's so much data available in terms of where people are, how people are thinking, or where they're living in terms of the things that are going on in the country. And so we start with that, obviously skewed to the Latino community in my case, but yeah, it's essential.
How cool is this microphone? It just changes your accent as you pass it around. So I think fundamentally, because we're marketers, for the fundamental thing is the business outcome. So we're swamped with data. There is so much data that we need to look at, but we've got to think about what is it that we're trying to find? What is it that we're trying to achieve here? Because you can measure anything. I remember a friend of mine, Jim Stern, who runs the Emetric Summit, once started a session saying, with analytics we can do all of this, we can measure the movement of a mouse across your monitor, and then he pauses for a second and says, why the heck would you ever want to do that? So, I mean, the data is out there. I think part of the problem that we have, though, sometimes as well, is that everybody uses this term big data, and with big data comes big bullshit. So I think you should really be suspect of a lot of the figures that are out there, and I am really kind of unlearning a lot of what I did before and looking at these numbers. You know, I said before I came online in 1995, people were saying, you know, build yourself a website and hundreds of people will come. And 18 months later it was thousands of people, and 6 months after that it was millions, and then it was billions and gazillions, and the numbers keep going up and they keep going up, but at the end of the day all you're looking for is a business outcome. So I think about what is it that we want to achieve, how do we measure that? The business outcome, sometimes because we're marketers we always think, well, that must be related to sales, so how do we make, you know, data from social media equate to sales? But at the end of the day, if you look at marketing as an umbrella term, there's a lot that you need to know from a marketing point of view, which is kind of around non-selling objectives as well as selling objectives. And then the other thing is, if you don't have the biggest numbers, somebody said this morning, I think it was Wally, said, you know, that size does matter. I don't believe in that. I think, you know, even if you've only got like 100 people following you on Facebook, go and look at your competitors' stuff, go and look at their data and learn something from theirs, you know. So there are many different ways of looking at the data and not always trying to equate that back to the sale just because we're marketers.
Do you think that marketers have a responsibility to sort of own that process and understanding, you know, what data you have available for each, you know, of your company, and how do you use it, and how do you not use it, and who sort of owns that?
Well, so that's where you get to this cross-section now between, you know, the technical side of the business and the marketing side of the business. So you've got what's becoming the chief digital officer, and I think that's kind of a combination of both. So at some point the chief digital officer will actually own that data, and he will own the budget that goes with it, because, you know, you have to be able to understand how to mine the data and then be able to act on that.
So Elian, I know a lot of your focus is certainly around the Latino community, and that the content and the information and everything you do sort of stems from not only, you know, potentially social media data or activity and behaviors, which is general personas and understanding the community and the culture. How do you use data to sort of meld that with, you know, what you know intrinsically about, you know, your community?
Well, what data does in my case is really validate certain assumptions that you have about the community. You know, I as a Latina, I think I know kind of where my community stands on certain things, but you need to have some kind of data backing up what your claims are. And so a lot of what I do is really take existing research or conducting my own research, but going beyond the numbers, because you know, you can get I think there's too much focus on the raw numbers of something, and that's because you're getting a lot of likes or a lot of shares doesn't mean that you're truly engaging or that you're going to be truly able to move the needle on an issue. And so you have to kind of take the numbers, you know, at face value a little bit and go a little deeper to see really what is the feeling behind it. What are the nuances in the responses that you get that truly tell you how the community, which way the community is moving.
Is there an instance for I guess for any of the three of you where you would maybe not rely on what the data tells you? You know, we had a conversation earlier as we were setting up around the concept of there's so much data, and there's so many numbers, and there's so much information at our fingertips. Do you always go by the data, or are there instances where you maybe stray from that just due to other factors?
I think there's always some data to go by. It's just a matter of what data you're looking at, and whether you actually have access to the data that is the most meaningful. Just as you mentioned, the number of likes you get on Facebook doesn't equate to sales, doesn't equate to what results a corporation might be looking for. If it's likes, great, right? If that's so, I would just say make sure that, you know, for social media teams within brands, I would say make sure that they're being measured, their efficacy is being measured on something tangible, not just how Facebook has chosen to present a user interface to their audience.
I think if you look at basically what we're measuring is web data, then if you look around, you'll probably discover that about 1/3 of all traffic on the web is fake traffic. and that's coming into your data. So you've got to try and eliminate some of that. And you know, then when you start and ask yourself from a social media point of view, what's a like worth? I'd switch it the other way around and say, how much does a like cost? You go online and you can buy 500 or 5,000 likes for 75 bucks these days. So, you know, I mean, I've got a friend in the UK who was kind of like a bit of a black hat kind of guy, and he explained to me that he once created a profile for a bot that he'd written, and the profile was called "I'm a bot, do not follow me," and it has more followers than his own Twitter profile has. So, you know, if you take a look at the traffic, then you really do sometimes have to put a finger in the air. I'll give you a genuine example here. I switched my blog. I used to blog very regularly until about 5 years ago, when I got a proper job and couldn't sit around and do that. I updated it to WordPress a few years ago, and I didn't realize there's this little box in the software. If you don't check it, it just means that anybody can register at my blog, okay? I used to blog frequently. I haven't updated that since 2011, and there's like 15,000 subscribers. Yeah? And so I asked a friend the other day who's an expert in WordPress, what am I going to do about this? And he told me about this box. He said, you go and uncheck that. By the way, there's a plugin that can get rid of the inactive users. So just last week, I unchecked the box, I put the plug in, and I said, anybody who hasn't posted, registered but hasn't posted within the last 1 month, let's get rid of them. And this little message came back and said, within 48 hours, it'll all be gone. Within 48 hours, I lost 4,500 subscribers. Or I lost 4,500 bots, put it that way. So, you know, begin to suspect some of the data, believe me, and just, as we're all trying to say, tie it back to those tangible business outcomes that you're trying to get.
What are your experiences, any of the three of you really, with sort of trying to aggregate and combine data, right? I come from a social media software company where a lot of our data that our customers use is strictly social, but there's tie-ins to sales data, to other sorts of whether it's softwares or integrations, but also just other quantities of data. What's your experience in that process, and how has it gone either smoothly or not so smoothly? And what advice maybe do you have for people who are trying to make sense of multiple sources of data?
I see a lot of brands collecting and starting to collect even more data over time about how their marketing efforts are going, and they're getting smarter because they're talking a lot to retailers now. We heard from Microsoft earlier, a lot of the work they're doing there on the retail side to digitize the behavior and that consumers are doing in stores, and tie that back to behavior online or behavior on the couch in the living room. So I'm watching the Super Bowl, an ad comes on, I tweet about it, I have a hashtag, that hashtag gets saved, my device is recognized when I walk into the store because there's an iBeacon, and now they can attribute, and that's the word, attribute, that conversion, if the conversion was in fact foot traffic in the store. So that's what their goal. So attribution is a big buzzword right now in the marketing circles that I swim in, and data is at the core of it.
I could say I was part of a campaign last year that we did in conjunction with one of the immigration groups. It was called the iMarch. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the iMarch, but it was this huge movement. And the interesting part of what we were doing is that it wasn't only online, but it was kind of combining social media efforts with real life efforts. So we had, marches, and we had live events in different places, in different cities. We had actual petitions that were being signed and delivered to the Congress. And so it was very interesting to be able to use a lot of different softwares to measure, attendance to events, and also to measure how many people signed the petition, how many people retweeted, and kind of help promote what was going on online, but also who was directing their followers to our live events, and how did all the different pieces work together. In the end, to measure the success of the campaign, we had to look into all of these numbers, because just getting a lot of retweets, which we did, didn't necessarily mean that we were getting people signing the petition, or that we had people actually clicking through the links that we were sharing, or participating in a tangible way. So so it was very interesting. It's one of the case studies that I like to post, because it tends to be that a lot of people do social media efforts as a silo. And I have found that the way that social media works the best is when you integrate it in your whole program from the get-go and make it like an essential part of what you're doing. And then that's when you can see whether your numbers are good or not, because you're seeing actual results that are a direct result of what you're doing online.
I think, yeah, attribution is a very important thing. By the way, I hope nobody's taking any pictures of this session, because if my wife sees you sitting this close to an attractive woman on a day, thanks for making it so intimate, though. Yeah, I'm sitting in the wrong seat. So yeah, I mean, attribution is really important. As a publisher, obviously, numbers, and I'm not saying that all publishers are liars, but you can begin to generate numbers to suit the purpose. And I was talking to the editor of ClickZ just a short while ago about the way that we use video at ClickZ, and she was saying the length of the video is really important, because people will only watch a video for 3 minutes, and I posted a video that was 12 minutes long. And I disagreed with her entirely, because I think, if you start to watch a video, and in 30 seconds, it doesn't matter how long it is, if you don't like it, it doesn't matter if it's 12 minutes, 12 hours, you're not going to watch it, kind of thing. But what she was saying is that if you look at the data, then somebody starts to watch a longer video, and they bail after 30 seconds, you think that's it, they didn't like the video. But the false positive there is, what if the guy, and that's me, when you go back home later that day, sit down and get your iPad out, guess what? You're another me this time, and then you sit and you watch it for the 12 minutes. So I think multimodal is very important, to be able to take all of these data sources, to put them together and try and make some sense out of it.
You bring up an interesting point around content, something that I think everyone's talking about these days in terms of content, driving decisions around what kind of content, what mediums do you distribute content on, and that sort of thing. How do you, I mean, that was a great example of it, but what are some other experiences you guys have in terms of using data, whether it's social data or just general data, to maybe contribute in terms of how you develop content, the kinds of content, where you distribute it?
I can talk to that. I actually, lately I've become a lot more intense about it, but I do weekly Google Hangouts, and it's interesting that you're talking about the length of video, because my Hangouts, I started doing them for an hour long. These are Hangouts that talk about Latino issues, and they're usually very complex, and they have to do with politics and everything else. And so what I started to notice is that there was a drop-off in the video after a certain amount of minutes. And so I decided to shorten the Hangouts, and using the data to see like at what point people tend to drop off helped me to decide, okay, so maybe I'll do them half an hour, and I make sure that halfway, at the 15-minute mark or something like that, I do something that kind of disrupts the conversation, so that people, the interest kind of renews. And it's been working. I've been getting a lot more engagement and a lot more views after that. So, in terms of measuring the results of the Hangouts, I tend to not so much go by the live views, because what I've noticed also is that I get a lot more views on YouTube after the fact. And people sometimes don't have time to watch it full, but then they'll go to YouTube and watch the whole thing in their own time. So, you just have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, but it's very interesting.
In terms of content being driven by data, or by how data can affect content, my team and I worked on a tablet, an iPad campaign that ran the New York Times iPad app for the movie called the Paramount Pictures Wolf of Wall Street. Paramount came to us directly with one goal. They wanted people to share what they called quotable moments from the film. And they had a special cut of the trailer that we helped them cut, that pulled out these certain moments in the movie, certain lines that were said by the actors in the film. And so this 2.5-minute trailer would play in the ad, and the user could pause during any one of these moments, and there was sort of always a quote visible that was in that segment of the film, and then they could immediately post that quote and add their own flavor to it, whatever they wanted, with hashtags and all that, to Facebook or post it to Twitter. So I have to think that those quotable moments could not, I don't know, but I can't imagine that they were just a side effect of some marketing person saying after, you know, oh, I've seen the cut of the film before it's released, and I noticed there are a lot of good posts to share. I think that went all the way back to the script room, all the way back to the writing room, where they thought, okay, this campaign is going to be measured by social metrics, by how many people are quoting and hashtagging and whatnot. How can we get people to do that more and repost them? So what are the most ostentatious, outrageous lines that Leonardo DiCaprio is saying as Jordan Belfort in that film? And how can we get users to most easily do that? In our case, we help them do that on mobile. But I think that's a direct, maybe I'm reading into it too much, but I think it's a direct correlation.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think, you know, because certainly social media, the other digital forms are sort of becoming part of the fold at the very beginning. It gives an opportunity for us to think through content and delivery mechanisms and all those other things, and really sort of try to skew certain things in a manner and in a way that will be much more shareable and much more easy to engage with when it actually comes time to produce that.
I think there is this very strong tie between search, which is kind of my background, and social. And I discovered many years ago, scientists had created this taxonomy on search. You know, just looking, he was at Alta Vista at the time, and he created this taxonomy about the way that people search and the intent behind the search. And I still use that now, what other people do, so I kind of think about creating the content to go with the intent, if you know what I mean, and then it becomes more shareable. So those three words, the taxonomy starts with informational, navigational, and transactional, and they're all entirely different stages. I mean, if you put that into a marketing perspective, that could be kind of a sales journey that people are going through. So maybe with informational, you want to start and think about a different kind of you know, content to connect. Maybe that's a video at that stage. But even when it gets to transactional, people always assume that when you say transactional, that means somebody's sitting with a credit card out. That's just the start of the dialogue. That could be somebody literally just following you on your social media site. It could be somebody signing up for your newsletter, your blog, as I've mentioned before, those kind of things. And I think if you start to create the content around the intent, then it gets shared at different times across social media as well. So it's a pretty good, I mean, that's based, the intent's based around the data anyway.
Do we have any questions from anything up in the audience? How am I doing on time? Do we know? We're done? That's it? All right. Well, then I guess I timed that pretty well. Thank you to the panelists for our thoughtful discussion and ideas. We'll be around if you guys have questions during lunch. We're happy to answer those and talk to it. And is that it?